The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at the heart of America's economic prosperity and unrivaled security is an abundant, affordable, and reliable supply of domestic energy. American energy independence is undoubtedly a matter of national security, but it's also a question of life and death to many rural economies. In West Texas and for my neighbors in eastern New Mexico, energy producers are as crucial to our communities as educators, healthcare providers, and ag producers. Traditional sources of energy make up 90% of our nation's energy supply and support over 10 million jobs in this great country. And in New Mexico alone, Mr. Speaker, more than 100,000 jobs are oil and gas related. A whopping 1/3 of the state's budget comes from oil and gas revenues. That's over $2 billion, half of which supports funding public education. Thousands of Navajo landowners receive millions of dollars every year from oil and gas royalties. Putting a permanent ban on any future mineral development outside the national park would be devastating for local economies, the Navajo people, and the entire state of New Mexico. Therefore, my motion to recommit would prevent this legislation from taking effect until it's confirmed that New Mexico will not suffer this severe economic harm resulting in a loss of revenue. Mr. Speaker, that's revenue used to fund schools, roads, hospitals, and other important public services. While this bill claims not to infringe on the private property rights of the Navajo people, the reality is that many of their lands are surrounded by federal lands, making it virtually impossible to develop if this legislation were to pass. H.R. 2181, let's be clear, would eliminate key revenue sources used for public services. It would destroy jobs and economic activity there in New Mexico and ultimately threaten the livelihood of the Navajo people. And this, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, would be an absolute travesty for the Navajo people because the poverty rate in the Navajo Nation is more than 3 times the national average, about 38%. The unemployment rate is more than 5 times the national average, 20+%. Almost half of all Navajo children live in poverty. Oil and gas related employment is critical to jobs and income in these isolated areas where the Navajo people live. It's unconscionable, Mr. Speaker, that a handful of activists should be able to deprive the Navajo Nation of opportunities to find work, opportunities to lease their own mineral rights, and opportunities to lift themselves up out of poverty by reaping the benefits of their own land. Mr. Speaker, there's an old Navajo saying, a rocky vineyard doesn't need a prayer, it needs a pickaxe. The Navajo people don't need more protectionist prayers from Washington elite and environmental activists. They need the pickaxe of prosperity and opportunity that come from freedom and the ability to manage their own private property rights and their own private mineral rights. The Navajo people are a proud people, just like all Americans. They just want an opportunity for a better life for themselves and their families. Mr. Speaker, this is a classic case of a solution looking for a problem, and I ask my colleagues to support this motion to recommit and vote no on H.R. 2181. I yield back.